My name's Alicia Trout, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist at Octave. Today, we'll be talking about generational trauma. Generational trauma is trauma essentially that's passed down from our ancestors and things that we might be seeing today in some of our interactions in our relationships. Generational trauma can get passed down from generations to generations through a few different ways. So of course this can actually happen physically. So our ancestors or our older generations, as they experience traumatic events, it's something that their body can hold on to. But then it can be passed down emotionally, and it impacts how we decide to show up within our family. And those kind of create rules that then are passed down from generation to generation that show up with us present day as well. You might be wondering, how would I even know if this applies to me? Generational trauma, it might be difficult to identify within ourselves. We might again start to feel like, wow, I'm wondering why maybe I show up as such a people pleaser. And then we look maybe to our parents and say, they really positively reinforced that I was a people pleaser growing up and that I listened to them really well and followed directions really well from other adults. We think about traumatic events that might shape generational trauma. This could be on a pretty wide spectrum. So we could be looking at things like social unrest, or we could be looking at times of war or potentially famine, depending on your family history. So maybe you have some past generations that lived through the Great Depression and food was a scarcity at that time. It was difficult to be able to provide for the family and ensuring that everyone had their needs met. And so what that could even look like in the next generation is, I grew up during the Great Depression, and so I want to make sure that I always have food on the table for my family, or really valuing, we need to finish this meal because when I grew up, we didn't have the opportunity to do that. And so our theme or our narrative in our family is we sit and we finish our meals. And so then that can continuously be passed down, this idea of you must finish your plate. When we understand where these patterns come from, they often make a lot more sense. Most of these behaviors didn't appear out of nowhere. They were developed for a reason. One of the most hopeful things I get to tell people in therapy is this: just because a pattern has existed in your family for generations doesn't mean it has to continue with you. If someone were wondering, where can I start? Like, it's great that I've learned now about generational trauma, what it is. Maybe I think that's something that I'm experiencing. Of course, it'd be great if you'd be able to talk to your parents, maybe to hear more about how are they parented, how are they raised, kind of getting curious about what did their background really look like. It's a great place to start to potentially understand the experiences that we have growing up. And then if that isn't an option, let's say that we either aren't in contact with our parents or they potentially aren't around anymore, start asking other family members if you can, to try to see if you can learn more, again, just about your background, to see where some of these themes might be coming from. When healing from generational trauma, therapy is something that can be really beneficial. Being able to sit with a therapist who can identify that maybe you are experiencing some effects of generational trauma can be helpful in that initial recognition process, which is really the start, right? Being able to shift this perspective of, I am this quote unquote problem, or I am this problem saturated story, being able to externalize that and say, oh wow, this is actually just a part of my family history. This is a pattern, or this is an experience that's been passed down from generation to generation. And then we can start to explore and learn more about that in the history. When working with clients, and especially as it relates to generational trauma, something that's typically surprising to them is this understanding that they finally have about their parents and their grandparents and older family members' behavior. It's kind of this moment of aha, like, wow, I understand now why we have to sit this specific way maybe at a meal, or I understand now why my parents really pushed and said, we do this in this family. This is something that we value. And so it's interesting when we get a chance to have that opportunity to take our parents off the metaphorical pedestal for a second and then kind of peel back who they are as people to understand. I often hear clients say that they don't want to become their parents, but then they realize that they have become their parents. And so in those moments, it's important for us to take a step back and think, well, what was happening in that moment? Was it probably a stressful moment potentially, or something that came up as a challenge? Because typically when we're in this kind of fight or flight potential state, that's when we might pull on or kind of rest on what was intrinsically taught to me, or intrinsically what do I know. And that's sometimes how our parents can show up in those moments when we weren't expecting it or didn't really want that to happen. And so that creates space for us to learn new tools to potentially use that in those stressful moments instead of feeling like I'm showing up as my parent. I have a client that I had the opportunity to work with, and in their family, there was a history actually of immigration that occurred actually from generation to generation. And what the client was coming into therapy about was having this essentially challenges with their partner when trying to figure out what a budget would look like, financially, what their goals were. As we started to peel back some layers about finances, and really the client being pretty strict on, we need to follow a budget, we need to have a rainy day plan, I want to ensure we've invested in something that's also going to pour money into our house just in case something happened. We then learned that their parents actually did the same thing. Their parents bought a property that was an investment property, paid off that property. They were raised in a household where money was pretty tight and pretty strict. Then to come to find out that their grandparents did the same thing. And so in talking to the client, they were able to talk about and put together that as their family, went through this immigration process from country to country, their values were essentially left behind each time they had to move. And so we were able to connect that it's important for them to have wealth at this point and to start to build generational wealth, because they essentially lost all of that throughout their family every time they had to move to a new country. Family work, especially deep ancestral work, is not something that is going to potentially be fixed in 3 weeks. It's not that we learn this information and then, okay, like I have now broken potentially some of these patterns. It's work that takes a while, and that really sits with us, and that's okay too. Breaking the cycle isn't about becoming a completely different person. It's about learning new ways to respond when old patterns show up. Whether your family experienced trauma generations ago or much more recently, healing is still possible. Healing doesn't erase the past, but it can transform what gets carried into the future. And you don't have to do that work alone. With support, compassion, and the right tools, it's possible to build relationships rooted in trust, emotional safety, and resilience. At Octave, we help people better understand the patterns they're carrying, where they came from, and how to build healthier ones moving forward. If today's conversation resonated with you, reaching out for support can be a meaningful first step. Go to findoctave.com to learn more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.